registered from now. And it will be published on YouTube later. So if you have any problem with that, switch off your camera or let me know later. So we will talk about cities beyond growth today, and with Anton Brokow-Loga. He's a PhD student at the University of Weimar in Germany, and he has published last year together with Frank Eckert an edited book in German on the post-growth city, which I found very interesting, and I hope that this will be a little occasion to bring it also to bring some of the ideas, I think, to people who don't speak German. Thank you very much for being here. So I will just try to introduce the topic shortly. So cities beyond growth, also perhaps more precisely talking about degrowth policies, degrowth transformations of cities. The degrowth debate has evolved over the last decades around the idea that unlimited growth is impossible. And more precisely, that for ecological sustainability, it is necessary to reduce production and consumption globally, but particularly in the global north. And that this must be done equitably, with the idea that degrowth rather than growth can improve local and global social justice, as it can deconstruct exploitative social relations of unequal ecological exchange and social-ecological destruction. Processes on which our capitalist growth-oriented socio-economic system is built. And in fact, degrowth is often conceived as part of a pluriverse of alternatives, also in a decolonial perspective, as the global north's contribution, so to say. Finally, I think the third fundamental part is that the degrowth project of social ecological transformation must and can be desirable individually and collectively. Desirable because less production and consumption can mean also less time spent working, for example, and then many other arguments, of course, and that this can allow to develop a new conception of wealth based on relations rather than possessions. In this debate, which is both an activist and a research debate, cities and space more generally have for a long time played a marginal role, I would say. And the main spatial transformation that authors like Serge Latouche, who has been one of the first important authors in this field, have proposed very basically a process of political and economic relocalization, with the idea to reduce complexity and impacts of global commodity networks, for example, and the vision that smaller localized communities could be more autonomous and democratic. And I suppose that the problem of such a vision of localism is quite evident for urban scholars, geographers, or who I think at least the ones of you I know are involved in. Because, such a localist vision is based on a conception of a historic localism that probably never existed, and it ignores existing geographies in terms of physical aspects like building infrastructures, landscapes, but also in the sense of material and immaterial interrelatedness of space. Certainly then there are more recent contributions to speak of a sort of open localism in which the idea of spatial relation is present and exists, but still it is not very clear how such proposals fit into existing geographies, how they want to transform them. But then in very recent years, 4 or 5 years basically, I would say, a debate has opened up where architects, planners, geographers have started to engage with a degrowth perspective and have contributed to a more sophisticated proposals rather. I would say that Anton's work, like this book I talked about before, is part of this new debate, and I'm not sure if you agree, but I suppose so, that your work could be seen as part of an effort to think about how to transform existing geographies at all scales in a multi-scalar perspective. In a degrowth framework, of course, not proposing naive visions of localism, but rather reflecting about how to transform concrete and specific urban and non-urban spaces. That is it for me. Floor is yours, and you have 30 minutes, I think we said, more or less, and then later we will have time for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Karl. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for inviting me here to the talk. Yeah, it's great to see you. Yeah, my name is Anton, and I'm now trying to share my screen with you. So can you see the slide? Yep. Now it's bigger, I guess.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. I think, Karl, thank you so much for this introduction, and yeah, also for the introduction to the degrowth debate and for the debate on cities beyond growth that is kind of growing at the moment, I guess, especially as this crisis is unfolding and as the climate crisis is really visible to all of us now. I think you raised many questions, and I'm not sure whether I'll have answers to those questions. I actually have more questions sometimes. It seems to me like a never-ending questions concerning these pathways towards urban degrowth. This is the roadmap for today. I actually want to start with the need of strategies for getting to know possible pathways. As we know, the problems that Karl was sketching, and we actually have an idea of where we want to end. But we actually don't know of how to go there. And that's why we actually need strategies. We need strategies that are discussed in the wider public, that are discussed in academia, that are discussed with activists. And for sure, I would love to get to know your perspectives on these possible pathways that some people are proposing. And I'm actually working with some colleagues on a matrix that is helping us as critical scholars to evaluate these pathways. And I want to propose this here to you, and I would love to get some feedback and would love to stimulate a discussion with that in the end. So I'm starting with why we need urban degrowth, and then with the logics and infrastructures of transformation, I'm trying to show you how this matrix is working, and then I'm of course open to the debate, to the discussion, as I said. Yeah, Karl said some few words about me already. I think that's totally enough. It's just that I wanted to show you the cover of the book we published, and as a kind of example of what we've been doing. Yeah, unfortunately, it's still only in German. We're working on translations. Unfortunately, not to Italian, but to English. And I've just heard that the poster we did after a conference on cities beyond growth was actually translated to Dutch. for the Dutch degrowth community. So yeah, I think step by step, and I think it's pretty important to do it in a multi-scala way, and local, transnational ways, because yeah, cities beyond growth are nothing that can be realized on a local scale alone. Yeah, I'm working at the Chair for Urban Studies and Social Research, so my job's basically also to yeah, educate the future planners and future architects of the Bauhaus-Universität in Weimar, in order to show them that there are important aspects of socio and ecological justice that we need to take into consideration when we plan and build cities and quarters. And yeah, we've just published another book where we are focusing on the transition steps that are visible during the pandemic that has shaken the world and has shaken urban living and urban the urban structures a lot. And maybe we'll have time in the end to reflect on this as well. So where we can actually see windows of opportunity at the moment, where we actually see new problems, new crises that we have to find answers to. And yeah, I think one of my main goals here is also to develop a kind of theoretical perspective on urban degrowth or on municipal degrowth, since yeah, I totally agree with Michael Brie and Dieter Klein, two German political scientists. A good theory is certainly not the most practical thing in the world, for sure, but a bad theory can make good practice impossible, since it divides minds and strategically sets up wrong criteria for real action. So I think it's pretty important to also reflect about the role of theory, the role of the theories of change we all have in mind. And I think one of the most prominent examples is the transition theory, the multi-level perspective. Maybe some of you know about it. Maybe you can focus on this later again, but I think we really have to be more radical towards thinking and speaking about theories, because it's really controlling our minds, how we perceive the theory of change for society. If we think of small steps of technological solution, if we follow a kind of solutionism, or if we really go deeper into the structures of society, the structure of our minds and of our institutions. So this is kind of one of my aims, one of my goals here, and yeah, I'm happy to present some of my thoughts here. Yeah, the basic question Karl was also raising is, why do we actually need urban degrowth? Why do we speak about degrowth? I put a graph here that is showing the level of the atmospheric CO2 emissions and the global GDP over a 45-year period. And this actually shows the decoupling story some people are trying to tell us. Yeah, with the to reduce the material footprint of countries and of cities, and in an effort to prevent crossing the 1.5 or the 2 degrees warming limit, many governments and many also city institutions have looked to this theory of decoupling. So decoupling is a kind of process that looks to reduce the number of resources being used and of CO2 emissions, while it's maintaining constant gross domestic product. So the growth that is in the heart of our society. And this is a kind of key perspective to sustainability, to sustainable prosperity. But however, we can see in this graph that this is not really possible, and this is not really that the evidence that is presented also in academia, also in science, is that over the last years there's actually no decoupling that is shown, no relative and no absolute decoupling. So there's no evidence that meaningful decoupling has ever occurred at either a regional or especially not at the global level. And so we actually have to think beyond this perspective of sustainability done by decoupling. And what is kind of like really strange is that we are actually successful in decoupling in another way. So we were not successful in decoupling the world GDP from CO2 emissions and from material and flows, but rather from we were kind of successful in decoupling income and happiness, or GDP growth and the way we are happy or not. So we can see here that there's actually quite big decoupling of these two statistical values here, just taken from the United States. And Peter Victor, US economist, said, Americans have been far more successful in decoupling GDP from happiness than in decoupling it from material and energy. So this shows pretty much that we've chosen the wrong way as societies, and also as city inhabitants and city institutions, because it's quite obvious that cities worldwide account for a large part of human-made CO2 emissions. So a lot of this is actually caused by the infrastructures and by the habits of city dwellers. And so the other perspective, like really trying to reduce, to work sufficiently, and to not only focus on innovations and technological solutions, and this decoupling move is the degrowth version. Karl said something about it already, and this is really going beyond the kind of normal way we understand sustainability, and also the way sustainable cities are made. I actually work in a collective of activist scholars that is trying to conceptualize the imperial mode of living as this kind of thing that is beyond sustainability, that is beyond the growth-based society and growth-based cities in particular. This concept was developed by two political scientists, and it is actually kind of showing that it's not only the big structure of capitalist exploitation that is at the core of the growth regime, and it's not only the individual, but it's both. It's kind of connected, and we are all forced, especially in the global north, we are all forced into this imperial mode of living. So it has a hegemony and is deeply anchored and stable due to our habits, our knowledge, our desires, the physical material infrastructure we are all facing. And this is quite much related to the way the cities were made for cars, for instance, or for being profitable instead of livable. And of course, the institutions that are not really democratic, and do not face climate crisis or the crisis of democracy and social injustice. And so I think it's pretty important to speak and think about different modes of living, to speak about a solidary mode of living and how this can be made possible by urban infrastructures, by urban debates, by urban projects, to really go beyond sustainability. And I think Karl is the best person in the end to maybe also explain some parts of his research on Copenhagen, where he really tried to show that even the most green, the most sustainable cities we can see heavily rely on externalization. And this is something that many cities have in common, that they actually rely on the exploitation of labor and biosphere in other parts of the world, and that they are pushing the costs of this mode of living onto other people in a temporal perspective and in a spatial perspective. And this is why I would say the hegemonic vision of a sustainable city is still not the solution to the multiple crises we are seeing at this very moment worldwide. But I promised that I want to speak about this possible pathways, this possible transformation strategies. And I just dropped one question. So how is change, for instance, in the urban housing sector even possible towards degrowth, towards a degrowth perspective? I could also, and we can also in the end speak about mobility, for instance, or migration, or urban or local democracy. I think those are all questions that are sectors that are very relevant at the moment, and I want to really I want to show that all of those sectors are kind of interconnected, and it's like really we can speak about this particular question because I want to make it concrete in the end. But actually, this transformation I'm speaking about is only possible if we are seeing the connections, the links between different sectors of urban life and urban institutions. And because we actually have to go deeper than the sustainable city development we are experiencing now, I think that's why it's really important to speak about the logics of transformation. So how is it really working? What are the different characteristics of transformation strategies? And then about the infrastructures, about the ways a degrowth city or a city beyond growth can also be stabilized, as the imperial mode of living is really stable and it's really inscribed in our institutions and in our minds. It's really important to focus on how can we stabilize the solidary projects, the projects of a solidary mode of living, in particular in this sector, for instance. And as I said, I'm trying to get, of course, many ideas from other people, and nothing of this is actually my own work. I think it's all a collective process in science and academia. I'm heavily relying here on Eric Olin Wright, who is known, I guess, for his work on emancipatory social sciences and transformation theory in a way. And he in his work envisioning real utopias, so he's a US sociologist, and in his work envisioning real utopias, he's proposing a theory of transformation, and he's proposing that a successful transformation is always relying on three factors, on three logics. And these logics are the ruptural logic. So this is basically the strikes, the demonstrations. This is actually not the huge breaks as we all think of revolution now when we think of ruptural logics of transformation. This is also the small scale revolution, the small scale interruptions of their daily life. This is the first logic of transformation, which should be combined with the interstitial logic of transformation. This is shown in, for instance, urban gardening projects and co-housing projects and all these niche initiatives that are maintained or that are feasible in the current logics of the system. And where we actually can see that another city life, another way of working together, of cohabiting, is actually not only possible but also feasible, and also to try and learn collectively new modes of living. And last but not least, these two logics should be then combined with a symbiotic perspective on change. So trying to integrate work in parliament, work in the institutions, work with planning institutions and offices, and trying to really change the legal system, change the political system, and also to stabilize some of the niche initiatives. And so the basic idea here is that it's important to connect the three logics of transformation for a successful transformation strategy that goes beyond the ideas of sustainable growth, but goes to sustainable degrowth. And I tried to adapt this a little bit to thinking of cities, and trying to also find some slogans that it's maybe easier for you to grasp what I mean, or what Eric Olin Wright was meaning. And this is actually already applied to cities. So the ruptural transformation, associated with rather the communist tradition. And I said something about the collective actors already and what they're doing, but the potential slogan would be, let's defeat the actors of the growth regime at the urban scale. Let's show how they are acting. Let's protest against them. For the institutional transformation, which is associated with the anarchist tradition, the potential slogan would be, let's show how another city is possible. Let's show how it's feasible with our means at this very moment in this society of today. Let's show how it's working. And for the some symbiotic transformation, which is rather social democratic, by like political tradition. Of course, there are many actors that work with such a logic in mind. Let's change the city step by step at the negotiating table. So using the local state in a way to struggle on the terrain of the state, and to form coalitions of social forces. So that's the level one of the matrix I want to propose. The other level is going back to the imperial mode of living, in a way to think of and how can we like really going to go to a deep transformation of the system. we're living in. And so focusing on habits, knowledges, and desires, on the physical material infrastructure, and on institutions. And there I'm asking, how do inhabitants really want to live or move in urban spaces? So what kind of city life is attractive? How is freedom perceived in urban spaces? I think concerning mobility and the power of the car-centered society, many things are changing at the moment, and there we really can see that the mental infrastructures of people are changing. The second one is physical infrastructures. This is of course interconnected. So how are urban spaces actually constructed? What habits do they enable? We can always see that the changes of physical infrastructures change a lot for the everyday life of citizens in cities. And last but not least, the third strategy, or the third category here, is the political and economic infrastructure. So how are urban spaces governed? Who owns the city? What about the municipal institutions? How open are they? Municipal democratic platforms. What's their vision of a theory of change? And so we have these kind of infrastructures that I'm trying to explain here, that are important when we think of this transformation of the way we inhabit our cities at the moment. And now the task is just to combine those two levels in a way, and then to find actors and to find actions that are possible and feasible here, in a way to analyze and get to a theory and to possible plans for transformation of cities beyond growth. And coming back to our question, so how do we transform the urban sector of housing policies? I just put some examples here from my experience, also as an activist. But of course, we can discuss that later, and also with different examples. Now, for housing, housing cooperatives, co-housing initiatives are kind of showing new material infrastructures. And these are kind of in the niche of the existing growth-led model of cities. So it's an interstitial transformation. Then we have maybe squatting, speculative vacancies as a kind of campaign. And this is like really breaking with the current logic of houses for profit. And I think, and many people there, in many cities, there are initiatives that are working on this topic, and we can put it here with ruptural transformation and connecting habits, and also with the practice of squatting. I think it's also touching the physical material infrastructure. For a different example, for instance, the cooperation with municipal administration, we can see that those initiatives are having a kind of symbiotic logic and working with institutions and trying to change them, trying to influence them in a positive way, and so on and so forth. And with this kind of mapping of initiatives on projects on a city level, we can see and notice two things. First of all, we can look at the connections between these actors. We should have a look how they relate to each other. So how are they influencing each other? Is there a plan? Is there a theory of change that connects those actors? Do they speak with each other? Those are the questions that we can see and that we can map here. And the other thing that is quite important to see, where are gaps? So is there a gap concerning thinking about new desires and an attractive model of a degrowth city concerning the interstitial transformation. So can we form new projects that go into these gaps and trying to have a more coherent way of dealing with the problem, and those trying to realize the city beyond growth and the city for people in the first perspective. Also, in a very in a way that is connecting those aspects of infrastructures and of logics. So this is a kind of matrix I want to propose. I tried to do this in some other workshops also with the topics of mobility, of migration, and so on. And maybe it can be helpful. I think there are also many things that are missing, but I actually think that we have to discuss more and reflect more on the transformative pathways beyond the sustainable growth city. So it's definitely time for municipal degrowth. Maybe some 6 aspects in the end, and in a nutshell. I think first of all, it's really important that we that the scale of the problem does not dictate the level of the solution. So when we consider climate change or global injustice, of course we have to reflect upon global answers, but as it is a multi-scalar perspective, it's really important to also focus on the everyday life and focus on the habits that are forced by urban infrastructures, for instance, and change them and try to use the municipality as a progressive actor in this multi-level perspective. The strategic pluralism was already visible in this matrix, I guess, so that it's that we should not argue about the best way to reach a city for all, but is rather a trial and error game, only possible with a variety of ways and means, and also learning from the examples of others, learning from, for instance, the examples of Copenhagen and Amsterdam, how they are trying to change the infrastructures, but how they are also fail to not externalize the cost of it. Then I want to just name that we have to think about exnovation instead of innovation. The urban politics that I am experiencing here, at least in Germany, are very innovative led. So they are trying to push forward new ways of working and co-working, and with all those hubs, they're trying to show that this is an innovative society, city society, and how this can be strength. Of course, it's important to think about new ways of learning for our societies, but we also have to discuss the things that needs to be unlearned, and that's why exnovation that's when exnovation comes into play. Really thinking about power structures and thinking about powerful actors and actions that we have to unlearn. As I said already, the work I'm doing here, and I think also the discussion in the degrowth community is actually based on the assumption that we are not able to develop a blueprint. We are not able to use a 3D printer to have a new and wonderful degrowth utopia, but rather it's important to really develop pathways and develop possible projects that can be adapted also from other city councils and from other groups of activists and from other scholars. Yeah, then I think it was made quite clear that it's really not about the not just to use moralisms to influence the habits or to influence the actions of the city dwellers, but really trying to change the infrastructures, really trying to change the way cities are working at the moment. And then as a last part, I think we need a critical constructive relationship with planning and administration, so that this symbiotic logic of transformation can also be part of the degrowth vision for cities, and also a part of the toolbox, for instance, so that actually cities are reclaimed and not only working against the local state and working against the growth-based regime, also using the municipal institutions, using the institutions that are actually made for a democratic development and democratic transformation and for just transformation, and going beyond the logic of a small sustainable island where everyone is happy, but forgets about segregation, forgets about environmental injustice, forgets about those city dwellers that are not that cannot afford being engaged in this transformation at the very moment. So like really using and pushing the administration in a way of reclaiming a right to the city and a city for all. So that's it. I'm open to questions, and I'm of course open to the debate. What do you think?
Thank you, Anton. So if anyone has questions, you can write in the chat, but you can also just start, as there are no as nobody has reserved a spot yet. If not, I can start with one point, which is about attention, that I think is always present in this perspective on transformation, which I share. But of course, there's always this question then, if you like move in all these specific contexts, in these specific ways, how can you actually go beyond sectoral change, around how can you avoid this problem that change often happens in one sector and then you build new problems somewhere else. And on the other hand, and I think this is closely linked, how can you avoid cooptation of solutions by the general logic? I think the answer is somewhere inside this perspective of strategic pluralism. Perhaps you could say something more about this.
Yeah, no. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question. I think, concerning the danger of co-optation, this is a point that is frequently raised, especially in the right to the city debate, I think, and in the critical housing policy debate. So I think, it's always present, this risk of cooptation. I think, it's the strategic pluralism, and it's also being aware of the fact that this can always happen. And there are actually examples. For instance, the German Mietshäuser-Syndikat that I put here, and I didn't explain it yet. But that actually that we're facing this risk very critically and openly, and trying to use the legal framework that we have at the moment, and trying to really find a complex construction where it's pretty hard for housing projects that are organized in the framework of the Mietshäuser-Syndikat to get co-opted or to get thrown into the real estate market again. So there are these examples, and I think it's not the one way that one can choose. So we cannot organize our society as a Mietshäuser-Syndikat, but we can always have this in mind, trying to, not initialize one project after another. Of course, this is important for social movements, as they are always active and they are fluent and flexible, and that's the role of social movements for sure. But I think it's pretty important to always consider the fact that we have to make our transformation stable, and to think about ways how we can stabilize them in the legal and political framework that we have at the moment. And concerning the first question you were raising, the answer is again quite complex. I think that those social movements that are on their way to social and environmental justice, that they always need a kind of key persons in the administration that they rely on or that they speak to. That's why we have the sector logic everywhere. So it's like really maybe also important for the way we work as human beings, that we have specific tasks, and that we have to have a kind of responsible person that we can rely on or that we can speak to. I think that's in the nature of politics, I think. But again, I would say it's really important to have the overview and to have the full picture of it. And this is, I mean, quite impossible for a society as a whole, or for a global society, to have this bigger picture. But I would argue that especially for cities, it is possible to have a kind of social movement-led or municipal-led or combined platform, where one can reflect about the actual policies and for all sectors and how they influence each other. The current urban politics is sector driven. I would totally agree with that. And when we look at how the housing question is dealt with, especially in Germany, I don't know about Italy, you can really educate me here, but in Germany it's framed as a social question only. And affordable housing is something we have to work on and we have to fight for sure. But it's in the interest of particular actors that we only deal with it as a social question, and do not speak about the ceiling of land that was previously nature. And this happens when we only think of housing and not think of the mobility that is important for building new housing or constructing new housing units, and if we are not speaking about the sealing of land that we have to stop, or the agriculture that is needed in the direct environment of the city and direct surroundings, of the city. Those are the questions that are connected to the question of housing, paradoxically. So everything is linked, everything is connected, and I think it's pretty easy to say that if you're in academia, but it's I think a big task and an important task to really trying to show those links on municipal platforms that are city-wide, for instance, or district-wide.
Thank you. Are there any other questions now? Or comments, or Marco, shall I read it?
No. It's more a note for me, because while I was listening to the presentation, by the way, thank you for the presentation, I was thinking of questions, and then I started to write, and it's a note, so don't read it. I read it. I will read it. And also, I think that Karl will hear some things that we already discussed in the past in the question that I will ask you, because it's something that we often discuss. So actually, I thought it was like a tripartite question made of 3 parts. One question made of 3 parts, but let me unpack it. On one hand, I have always some problems when we deal with degrowth and we talk about urban degrowth. In terms that I usually prefer to speak of spatial degrowth, because I can, also in the example you were doing, the last example, the last words you were saying, it's very difficult to separate what is urban, what is not urban, where do degrowth should stop, and where we should have another paradigm or another idea to deal with the same problems. So on one hand, there is this idea of density and concentration, which is always a problem for me, and I want to know more on that from you, which has spent so much time thinking in a very interesting way on the topic. The second question is that we were speaking about Amsterdam, Copenhagen, etc., etc. So in a way, this is something you and also Karl touched upon before, on the affordability of the degrowth issue, on the fact that basically if we are in a situation in which there is some sort of social infrastructure, then you can also allow yourself to have some interstitial initiative to do something, and because you have the luxury of time, the luxury of the possibility of thinking in a degrowth perspective. And linked to this is something that again has been touched, I think, by Karl in his initial comment, and is anyway present also in your presentation, which is how global can we think of the degrowth discourse, and not something which is very much linked to the global north, if we want to use the global north, global south, of course. Let's use it for the sake of simplicity, or not overcomplicate things. But how it is a worry of the global north, how complicated, how difficult it is to think about it in a global perspective, in a way, and this is just for the sake of making my question end my question. Sometimes I think we should colonize the discourse to then decolonize it. But it's very complicated otherwise to just think of decolonizing the degrowth perspective. If we think outside of certain contexts, outside of certain places where it's also easily understandable, and maybe it's not so easily familiar or understandable in other contexts. I hope I said something that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
I'm very interested in listening to your opinion on these issues. So thank you.
Yeah, and definitely also to the others. I think other people can relate to these questions as well, and we'll find answers together. I didn't really understand the last question, so the last comment. I think maybe in the end you can make that more clear. That would be really interesting, like colonizing the debate and then decolonizing it.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm starting with the last question that you are raising. Yeah, I think. A global vision of degrowth and a global and in particular for the global north is pretty important. I think degrowth doesn't provide a solution for everything and for everybody, and especially not for countries or groups of persons in the global south, but in the global north, and especially in the centers of the global north, in Western Europe and Middle Europe and so on. It's our responsibility to push towards degrowth and push towards degrowth economics. And I think your question is also connected to the way we want to what you want our world to be structured in a way. So at the moment we are facing a kind of renationalization, especially in the light of the COVID pandemic. I mean, the countries of the global north, for instance, bought all the or 90% of the vaccine against COVID-19 that was available, like really using all their power to only help their societies, help their nations, and forget about the rest. So we can see a really nation-based system at the moment. And I think when we are speaking about spatializing degrowth in a way, or speaking also about the territories of degrowth, the territorial aspect, one vision could also find an answer to this problem of the unjust nation system we are facing here. I mean, it's a big task, but my vision would be, and many others are publishing very interesting papers and books about it, is a translocal system, or is a municipal system of learning and of organizing our global society. So I'm of course getting rid of nations is a task that is way too big at the moment, or it seems to be too big. But with transmunicipal networks, with urban policy mobility, I think we can really see that things are changing, and that many cities are having really ambitious climate targets. They have ambitious migration policies, often more ambitious than the nation states they are situated in. So I think let's take the climate emergency in many cities of the world. This was decided by the municipalities and by the parliaments on city level, and I think imagining a global sense of degrowth is related to open localism and to relocalization, and then to translocal networks and translocal structures of policies, of trading, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I would of course love to open this question also to the others. I mean, two other aspects to the first and the second question. Yeah, how affordable is degrowth? I think that's not the basic question, because degrowth is of course a discourse that is exclusive, and that's it's a course that needs also a lot of knowledge, and that it's a topic that is also not really translated to the economic and political challenges we are facing. So there are actually many initiatives that would not call them degrowth initiatives, but are citizen-led, and they're trying to navigate in a system of poverty and in a system of urban segregation to organize themselves, to have a kind of community organizing. And I would say they definitely belong to the big picture of transformation, of socio-ecological transformation. And then it's not really necessary that they themselves say, yeah, we are for degrowth, but they are for solidary action on the ground. And yeah, so it's not only about affordability. However, the social dimension of engagement is really crucial, and we of course have to consider this fact. Yeah, what was the first question again? Is spatial degrowth for sure? Yeah, why not? I think we have to speak about it, and to find ways how to not leave the rural areas for themselves, for sure. I mean, I think it's about the built living spaces in a way that should be considered as maybe also the first level of society, the first level of state, like trying to take the local state, the urban state, also small states, for small city states, for instance, as the first level of the state, where we all meet, like the basic principle of the agora, of the polis, to reclaim this idea, and organize this in an open way, for sure, and not in a parochial sense. No.
Thank you. Sorry, I started a trend because there is another very long question.
Marco.
Yeah, so like you partially already answered to the first question that I made, because like it was very similar to the one that Marco Sant'Angelo just made. Like it was about like a new form of social inequality that can emerge from degrowth discourses and implementation and policies. Also the one between urban and non-urban, for example. This is like one thing that I would like to ask. The second question is more conceptual. Oh yeah, and thanks for the very interesting presentation, by the way. I forgot to introduce it, my question with that, but was very interesting. So the second question is more conceptual. Maybe you already answered in a sense, but I think it's important, at least for me, to think about this. And it's how the discourses about degrowth sometimes do not addresses the main issue, namely the fact that growth is a keyword for contemporary capitalism to work. And the degrowth discourses sometimes risk to limit themselves about solving the symptoms and not the disease in themselves. So basically, the fact that degrowth discourses usually try to provide solutions for problems but do not go to the root of this problem, namely the social and spatial organization of our society, and the fact that the unlimited growth is fundamentally what is killing the planet right now and the contemporary era. So like sometimes it seems to me that several discourses of degrowth, instead of like fighting the roots of the problem, instead reinforce the idea that we have to, that we should live in a green capitalist world. You know what I mean? So instead of fighting the root of the problem, reinforcing partial solution to those problems. Not your discourses in particular, but in general, it seems to me that like sustainability, degrowth, and these kind of keywords usually have been used for the purposes to implement green capitalist policies instead of, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, concerning the last question, I've had many arguments, especially with scholars here in Germany, about calling it Postwachstumsstadt, calling it a degrowth city, the project we are organizing here. I'm actually, yeah, I'm in favor. I am in favor also to call it a solidary degrowth city. But the fact here concerning your question is that degrowth is something that is not easy to co-opt from a like capitalist perspective. Growth is like really at the center, at the core of accumulation of the current regime, of the current capitalist and anthropocentric perspective of our belief and of our structures in society. And so I think that degrowth is not the most catchiest word for being also an attractive solution, but it's a very good umbrella term for critical discussions, since it's pretty hard for capitalist actors or for actors that are pushing forward the neoliberal and imperial agenda and mode of living to co-opt it. And this is also a learning effect from the sustainability discourse, I think. So at the moment, I would argue there are two positions on sustainability and also on sustainable cities. One is it completely failed. So because decoupling is a myth, and there's no evidence, not at all, for decoupling to work. We have to completely get rid of it and find new words for it. So I don't know, degrowth or economics. For diversifying economics, for instance. So this is the one perspective, and the other is, no, we have to get rid of the 3-column model of sustainability, like economics, ecologics, and social column, because the economics is kind of the economic column is kind of colonizing all the rest of it. As you were saying, and as you were proposing, we have to go to a model of strong sustainability, where we have the ecological system as an umbrella or as a provider for everything, and then we go to the social part, and then the economics is at the core, but it's highly depending that we have a social system that is working. If we think of care work, for instance, that is often not paid, and it's also heavily relying on the functioning biosphere, on a functioning climate worldwide. So I would say it's not the end of sustainability and of sustainable cities, but it actually needs huge changes, and for it to be the critical vision it has been some, I don't know, 40 years ago. I think after 1992, after the introduction of sustainable development, the mainstreaming was kind of the factor that led to the failing vision of sustainability in a way. So what was the other question again?
Yeah, no, it was about the same question that Marco Sant'Angelo made, so it's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Yeah, Karl, what do you think?
I think, Anton, you must leave, right?
Yeah, in a couple of minutes. Yeah, that would.
Yeah. Now, well, perhaps the thing I would add to this point is, well, I have never seen a case where degrowth has been like promoted in a green capitalist logic. But if you have seen any, I would be very curious about it. But
no, I haven't. It was just like
okay,
that, a question that came to my mind. A risk that this kind of logic sometimes can occur.
No, well, there is one point, and actually, usually there is one argument which I find interesting in degrowth, that certainly capitalism is a point, but there are perhaps even more profound logics in modernity that must be made, and then that are, for example, equally present in much of socialist thought, in a logic of, in the perspective of unlimited progress and linear pathway towards continuously increasing wealth and growth. So in this sense, you could argue that degrowth tries to go even deeper to the sources of the problem, but I mean, I don't really want to argue what is the deeper analysis, but I think that this is an important point, that it's not only about capitalism. I think saying to you must smash capitalism is not enough in a way, and then also a problem, but this is perhaps also a personal problem, and I don't talk about it that much because I often feel perhaps I haven't read enough, but I sometimes have the impression that some people say smash capitalism, but then it's not very clear what this actually means. Like what does it mean to smash capitalism specifically? And but then this is a personal doubt I have with that, and in the degrowth debate, certainly there are also many things open. But what I like is that it is also very plural, and a diversity of proposals come together, try to work out how they can work together, and do not assume to be exclusionary and universal solutions. I just wanted to post for who is remaining. There are two special sessions we are organizing, me and Anton, and some other people, on these issues at the upcoming degrowth conferences virtually in Manchester and perhaps physically in The Hague. So I posted the links in the chat.
Yeah, you're all welcome there. Go for it.
Okay, so I think it's 6:30 and some people are leaving, so if there's nothing urgent anymore, we can close it here. And thank you very much for being here. Thanks, Anton.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
And I hope we see you again. Bye.
Bye.